So you say when it comes to love, we can be our own worst enemy. So what are some of the primary ways that we get in our own way?
You know, it's funny because people aren't really aware of getting in their own way. That's the thing that's interesting to me. And partly it's because the thing that gets in the way is the defenses that they developed when they were children. And they're not even aware that they have those defenses. So they have reactions based on their past and that aren't appropriate in their present life, but they make sense to them because they've had them their whole lives. So, they can just either, there are all kinds of things that they can do. They can find themselves, they feel especially close to somebody and then they find themselves being critical of them, or they find themselves being distrustful of them, or they find themselves feeling claustrophobic and they need to create some distance, or and there's just weird things that we do. I mean, we could be really close and the next thing we know we're picking a fight. There are all kinds of things that people do. And the thing that's so sad is that because they're not aware of them, that it's confusing to people. They don't know what happened. And a lot of times they blame their partner. And in trying to make sense of what's going on, they blame their partner for their reaction rather than thinking about themselves and how it has to do with them and their past. So the book goes into specific ways that love threatens people. And one is, it makes them feel vulnerable and open to another person. It makes them feel trusting of another person. And that scares people, because of the ways that they've defended themselves. A lot of times love makes people feel sad. And that's upsetting to people. They think sadness is a bad emotion, a negative emotion. Sometimes it can make people feel guilty. It can make people feel guilty in relation to people in their families, to have such a good life or to have someone loving toward them when somebody in their families doesn't have that, is miserable. One of the biggest things is that it can change your identity. If you formed an identity growing up that was negative and then someone comes along and loves you, then you're immediately at odds with that person because you have two different ways of seeing you. And so you have to either adjust and change the way you see yourself or hang on to the old familiar way of seeing yourself. So it's just funny because something I was listening to a podcast and I thought was really interesting because they were talking about rom-coms and romantic movies, and they were saying that the movie always shows up to when they fall in love. It never shows the part afterward. And I thought that that's really interesting because the part afterward is when the work really starts and it gets real. And that's when the challenge is for developing a relationship.